So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from Brussels. It's a great pleasure to see you all here virtually present in our event. Today, I would like to extend our deepest gratitude to all our experts around the world and all the mortgage experts and housing market experts have been contributing to our activities over the years. This is the last virtual event of the year, and I think that all together as a community, we move forward. We support the housing market around the globe, and we have improved our capacity to work as a group, as a community. That's, I think, the spirit of this organization is a unique element that has created bridges all over the world. I'm personally just back from Japan, from Saudi. We will be in the States in a few days. And this global approach is an element of contradistinction and a characteristic that is making our organization a successful platform. Today is also our honor and our pleasure to launch a new platform, a data platform, which is bringing all our knowledge and all our information in a common electronic platform, completely free, open source, that can be used by all the politicians, all the journalists, all the researchers, all the university for free. We want to set a clear benchmark in the global world where we can build a data lake for housing and capital markets. Today, it's a special day. It's the 11th of December. And here in Brussels, it's 3 minutes past 1 p.m. But in Dubai is already, I think, 4 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. And we are arriving to the last moment of the COP28. It's a tremendous moment where probably a final compromise is sought and is looked forward, and probably we will see an important result of this COP28. We are only 8 years from the COP21. The COP21 was concluded on the 12th of December 2015 in Paris, and the world since then has changed. And we as a housing community, as a covered bond market community, we have a big responsibility to bring the solutions on the table. And I think that we are integral part of this COP28, and we are here to discuss the importance of data and the importance of contribution of our industry to change the ecosystem and to change the regulatory landscape around us and be able to take the leadership and provide solutions to the people. Why housing is important for the people? Well, in only 1 month time, we will have the beginning of a new political year. We will start with the 13th of January with the political election in Taiwan. And then we will finish with the American election. So next year, probably next December, when we will have the same virtual event, we will live in a different world. In the meantime, we will have a European election. We will have a completely new leadership in Europe. And of course, sustainability will remain one of the major drivers impacting our daily business, but also our daily political environment. Housing is a source of hope because we should not forget that having a mortgage is the way how to build a new future. And also as a component of social lift, which is giving opportunity to people that they don't have immediate resources in this moment. If we look around us, at 7 o'clock tonight in Strasbourg, the Econ Committee of the European Parliament will be voting probably for the banking package, which is the implementation of the Basel III in Europe. We will arrive probably in Q1 from a final vote on the plenary of the European Parliament in plenary in Strasbourg, probably in January and February. Well, Europe is fully committed to implement the Basel III package by the 1st of January 2025. Japan is ahead of us. Japan will implement officially the Basel III package already on the 1st of April next year, 2024. And the US and the UK will be implementing the Basel III starting from the 1st of July 2025. Of course, this is radically changing our perspective and our regulatory landscape. This will bring new investors because, of course, when implementing Basel III, covered bond will become eligible for all the LCR buffer around the world. And this is a nice opportunity that we should take advantage as a community, but we should work on data and definition. We should allow the investors to enter in our space. Also, last week on Thursday, here in Brussels, another important piece of legislation has been agreed as a trilogue. So the Council and the European Parliament have agreed on a common text for the Energy Performance Building Directive. This has a huge, big impact of the entire housing market in Europe, where we have to retrofit more than 200 million of dwellings, and we have to finance this retrofitting. So our community is becoming greener and greener and ready to support sustainability. We have done a lot as a community in the last years. We have built an energy efficiency mortgage label designed to give opportunity to people and to give clarity and transparency to investors. We have done an ESG covered bond label that is now we have more than 135 billion outstanding in our platform, giving full transparency to investors. So our community has been working all together to build a new space, more sustainable, more socially equal, and greener. And I can speak on behalf of this community to all our expected that we are fully committed for the next year to make the difference and to give our contribution in a positive way to this debate. The title of the meeting today is Housing the Next Generation. It's Next Generation has been the leading political item for this European Commission. Ursula von der Leyen is approaching the end of her mandate for leading the European Commission. And I think that Housing the Next Generation is the right spirit by which we should build a more transparent market with a new data lake and with new opportunity. Allow me to give the floor to the chair person of the Statistical and Data Committee of the European Mortgage Federation. And I would like to thank you, Julia, for the excellent work that you have been doing, but also all the experts that have been working very hard under your committee. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you very much, and very warm welcome on this chilly afternoon from Budapest, where we already have snow. And also good morning or good evening to the colleagues who are in a different time zone. We are really becoming international now. And going on with the themes that Luca was just mentioning, we say this is a very generous saying that for many families the housing is the most important asset what they have in their life. In Hungary or in the Central Eastern European region, this is even more important because people, 80% or in some countries even 90% live in their own homes, and the rental market is not so developed. The other special characteristics in our region that the outstanding residential loans to GDP are relatively low. Whereas in more developed European countries, it is 50%, or in some countries even more. In our region, it is around 20% or even less. And then comes the question that with all the climate change and other sustainability problems, people who are living in their own homes, they don't even have the means to renew their homes. How can we face this situation when we have to reach our very ambitious climate goals? And another calculation for our market, Hungary is a small market on the European mortgage scenery. But we have 4.5 million dwellings or housing, and most of these dwellings were built before 1990. So a very large part of the dwellings is very inefficient from energy point of view. If we would go with the renewal rate building new dwellings, actually right now we have less than 0.5% in the renewal rate. So it means that it would take 200 years to renew the existing dwelling. So you see how absurd it is that we have goals for 2050 to reach. And even if our property market is not the most developed, but many countries face the same thing. So when Luca mentioned a new retrofit program, renewal, ecosystem, I think this is very important that we know the best practice in other countries, that we unite our forces and try to learn from each other example. And I think this is a very great contribution from EMF to see all the markets, to look behind the figures, the data. This is what we do in our data and research committee. And I look forward very much to hear all the very interesting presentations this afternoon. And since I have been working in this work group for more than 10 years, I also see how the focus has changed. And earlier we have other issues, but today the challenges ahead of us are quite clearly the environmental, the demographic, and the affordability topics. So I am very much looking forward to hear the presentation of the colleagues, and I give back the word to my colleagues from Brussels and to go on with the interesting topics this afternoon. Thank you very much. And I can see, I am also very happy that our participants list is already exceeding 100. So we have a nice audience also with us. Thank you very much. And thank you, Luca, for introducing me.
Thank you very much. Eric, can I give you the floor to introduce a bit what are the latest data that we have? Eric will give us two presentations today. Just to, first of all, it will be the collection that you can find in Hypostat, and then we have a second moment where we would like to present you the new platform that we have created to provide this open source completely for free to everyone. Eric, I give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for passing over the word to me. And as we were already talking about data and data developments, I like to highlight our main mortgage and housing publication, which is our Hypostat 2023, which takes a look at the latest developments in housing and mortgage markets. And based on our statistical review and the Hypostat data set, we have identified three main key challenges for 2023 and of course also ahead. The first one is that the European residential dwelling stock must adapt to the rapidly changing climate conditions, and we must force the efforts how to frame and how to redevelop our building stock to meet our very ambitious goals. The second main key challenge is that the demographic changes in Europe are rapidly and very different across different regions in Europe. And a third one, very actually, is that these key challenges we have identified are getting under pressure with rising financing costs by latest monetary developments and also by the developments of construction costs. So first, taking a look at the demographic challenges that were also highlighted by the United Nations and their key publication, the World Population Prospects, published in 2022, who have identified main key challenges of especially rising population sizes in Africa and in eastern parts of our world. We have to say that the demographic challenges in Europe are quite different. Especially in Eastern Europe, we are facing declining population sizes and increasing population sizes in the Scandinavian regions, and stagnating population sizes in Western and Southern Europe. So a really reframing of our demographic outlook in Europe is putting pressure of how we can adapt our building stock to these new challenges and these new developments and demographics. When we are taking a look, as Gyula was already highlighting, how people in Europe living, we have to see that especially in Eastern Europe, people are primarily living in owner-occupied housing, while especially in Germany and Austria, less than 50% of the people are owning their own dwellings. So the challenges are very different all around Europe, especially through owning or renting. And also the size of the mortgage markets is different across Europe. So in Germany, we have high outstanding volumes of mortgages, while we're having low owner occupation rates. In Eastern Europe, we're having high owner occupation rates, but very low outstanding mortgages. And taking a look at how the house price indexes are developing to these changing populations, it's very interesting to see that especially in Eastern Europe, HPIs were increasing while demographic numbers were declining. So it is difficult to see how things are aligned across Europe, and it's very important to take a very narrow look to regional developments. So statistical analysis on a very low level, on a very broad level for every region in Europe is crucial to identify solutions to these challenges we were outlining. The supply of housing is also under pressure because of rising construction costs. So construction costs, especially since 2020, were significantly increasing, while also the share of people working in the construction sector were declining and just starting to recover in the recent periods. While when we are taking a look at building permits, we have to see that governments are taking actions to increase building permits offered and also to increase the supply while relaxing their requirements. Going over to the next identified challenge, to the building energy performance, we have to highlight that the household sector and the housing sector is contributing close to 30% to Europe's final energy consumption, which is more than the industry sector itself. And putting this next to the really use to readjust to global warming and to find solutions to polluting, we see that adjusting the building stock, redefining how we can build our homes is a key contributor how we can solve global challenges in terms of global warming. So when we are taking a look at the frequency of natural disasters around the world, it is not a lie. Climate change is happening, and the energy sector for housing is a main contributor also in Europe. So especially adjusting space heating, which makes up to 65% of the pollution of the dwelling stocks, high performance envelope combined with good isolation and heat recovery ventilations are key contributors how we can adjust our building stock and where we have to undertake actions. A recent study have identified that especially private funding and the quality of upgrading the energy footprint of our building stocks by transparency quality labeling are important for consumers and having a high contribution to the energy retrofitting and being especially cost effectiveness in the long term. Our industry, therefore, is crucial to achieve our long-term goals and helping Europe to adjust in their global challenges. When we are taking a look at direct externalities that can be achieved by retrofitting our building stock, every retrofitting project contributes 1,100 kilowatts in savings of energy per year, which saves up to 360 kilograms of CO2 per year. And indirect externalities are also achieving other achievements like creating jobs. Every million invested in a retrofitting project can create 3.5 jobs. And greater consumer interest through highlighting these developments are reshaping the view of consumers towards our industry and towards the green transition. Taking a global approach, we see that the expected growth rate through 27 is up close to 15% for the green housing market, which is a market size of $215 billion, which is especially focused in the Asia-Pacific region. But these developments are under pressure due to rising financing costs all around the world, and especially in Europe. We have seen an increase in mortgage interest rates, which are already going down, especially in Eastern Europe at the moment, but still are significant to put pressure on our positive developments we like to achieve. But our industry have also proven flexibility to adjust their financial products. For example, variable interest lending went down in recent periods to ensuring consumers to be able to repay the mortgages on the long term. Especially for countries with low fixed interest rates like Spain, we have seen an adjustment and an increase of these products. For example, in Germany, as financing costs were very high at the moment and most mortgages were offered on a long-term fixation, we have shown flexibility to offer them variable interest rates that could be fixed in the recent future when interest rates go down again. With this, I like to summarize that the housing and mortgage market, especially through its size of 8.9 trillion outstanding mortgages of Europe, and with 70% of peoples around Europe owning their own houses, with 25% of these people having a mortgage, is having a crucial impact on the European society and can contribute especially to the green transition. With this, I like to thank you and hand back to Luca.
Thank you very much, Eric, for the very comprehensive presentation. Well, just to recall that, of course, you can raise questions in the chat or just raise your hand. We want to keep this as a dialogue. And now we will have, I think, two very important panels where we will try to give the floor to experts that can help us in guiding in this journey in the housing markets. As we have seen, we can make the difference. We are making the difference, and probably we have done the difference in the past. And shaping the housing market in the future, it's a global story. Referring back to what I said about the COP28, I think this is for the first time a very economical COP28 COP meeting. We are really discussing between two major problems. For example, Africa is a continent that is producing only 3% of the CO2 emissions and is paying probably the highest price in terms of climate change, displacement of population, and housing is a critical element for new houses, so new buildings that have to be built. Probably millions of dwellings have to be built in regions outside Europe, and creating the capital to allow those countries to grow is, I think, also a moral question for our community in Europe on how we can support and how we can provide investment for those markets. I have the pleasure to have with me very distinguished speakers. Allow me to introduce them. We have the pleasure to have, allow me to start with you, Maria. Professor Maria Hoch-Smith from Wharton School. She's based in Pennsylvania. She's contacting us from Philadelphia, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Maria. It's a great pleasure to have you here, and also it's a great pleasure to collaborate with you for the Offinet platform, which has the ambitions to create a global platform for housing markets. We have also with us today Luis de Mello from the OECD. He's been involved in all our discussion on housing. The role of the public sector, the Minister of Finance, and the coordination of this activity in the housing is crucial for all of us. And we need to build a joint venture between public sector and private capital. So having you today for us, it's an honor. And I would like also to welcome Antonio Farina, that has been traveling all over the world with us in order to build covered bond markets and also to have a deeper understanding of housing markets, covered bond markets, and how the private sector can contribute actively to develop a global opportunity around the housing markets. Last and not least, allow me to welcome you, Oscar, as a chair of ISMA, our International Secondary Mortgage Market Association. We have been able to open up our mind with a global perspective. We all realize with the enlargement of our membership that we need to find solutions not only for 27 countries, but we have probably more than 110 countries that have developed solid housing solutions. So thank you very much for being with us. So, Maria, as I said, I would like to start with you. This morning you are in Philadelphia, but a few days ago you were in Nairobi. And I would like just to ask you, considering also my comment about the 3% of CO2 emissions coming from Africa, and they are paying the highest price. What we can do in terms of housing to develop a global platform? I give you the floor. Thank you very much, Maria.
Thank you, Luca. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon for most of you. Um, it is a pleasure to talk at this forum, but it is also an excellent time to talk about data. Because so many countries in the world are really expanding their housing finance systems very rapidly because of urbanization, growing populations, and income growth. So we have a lot of demand for mortgage finance, for microfinance, non-secured finance for housing, and also for capital market products, because the funding side of most financial institutions has to be expanded with the growing demand for housing finance. So this creates an enormous pressure on many countries to expand mortgage lending. However, that takes clarity. It takes clarity to move forward. And clarity requires information. And at the moment, the global data on housing finance is really scattered and a little bit all over the map. The definitions are not quite standardized, and it is difficult for individual countries to compare themselves to neighbors, to other countries in the region. But this is a very positive time. I was just, as Luca mentioned, in Nairobi, and I learned that the UN Habitat Assembly passed a resolution in June, this past June 23, that indeed required UN Habitat to begin to look seriously at their new focus on affordable housing and prioritize data collection. So they are revamping the exercise that was started some 30 years ago on creating housing indicators that are globally accepted across the world, and where indeed UN Habitat has to take the lead to work with individual countries in a process to make it actually happen in the individual countries, so that they can accumulate the data on housing indicators. That is on general housing market indicators. Housing finance and data on housing affordability is, however, one important component of the indicator project. And so it's very hopeful that we have the large global organization focused on that. The second important change, and that is more in our family, is that HOFINET and EMF-ECBC are joining forces on the standardization and the collection of housing finance information. So the UN exercise will draw on HOFINET data and EMF data for their components on affordability, but we on our end are joining forces to actually create a large global standardized database for housing finance. HOFINET is already working with a lot of different countries on this and has experience now for 10 years to do this. And the EMF has a large network of other institutions, so the combined institutional base is very promising for this exercise to be very successful. So I look forward to work with EMF-ECBC and with all of the individual partners to make this a successful joint effort, and on improving the database so that we can actually develop research and competitive housing finance information platforms. Thank you, Luca.
Well, Maria, we are very honored to follow up your excellent work. You have been leading this work for several years, and I think that we are following your path here. And I think joining forces, it was the most important strategic decision that we have done in the last years, because data is the core of building a new market, is the core for having new investors, is the core for building a new liquidity that can support markets in emerging countries, but also in developed countries. Luis, allow me to come to you, because I think here there is a synergy that we have to develop between private market stakeholders and also public sector. I mean, how you see, what is your perception of the housing market opportunities that we have? How important are data in your landscape?
Thank you very much, Luca. It's a great pleasure to be on this panel with Maria, with Oscar and Antonio. Listen, let me draw a bit on what we heard from Eric and from Maria as well, because I think this is really a very important initiative that you are inviting us to join you on, Luca. Eric mentioned lots of recent or ongoing trends, that are affecting the housing landscape. One can think of the very sharp increase in house prices that many countries around the world have faced and what it implies for affordability. We can think of climate change and all the sustainability-related aspects of housing. One can think of how the monetary policy landscape is changing in the world, how that is affecting global financial conditions, and what it may imply for financial vulnerabilities associated with the housing sector. We can think of the post-pandemic uptake of remote working and digitalization, how it's affecting the demand for housing in different parts of our countries. I mean, all that is really reminding us of the importance of information, as Maria pointed out, and the importance of data. I work, essentially with the policymakers in our day-to-day job here at the OECD, and that has been one of the key, obstacles that we've had sometimes in terms of understanding policies and what can be done to improve the working, the functioning of housing markets, is that we often do not have the information that we need at the level of granularity that we need, with the standards of comparability across countries, and so on. The timeliness of information, sometimes we have to deal with indicators that are old. So all that points to this very important need to work more on the evidence base on which we can discuss the merits or demerits of different policy actions. I mentioned granularity as an important point. A lot of housing policies are conducted at local or regional levels of government. There are several indicators that are only available at the national level. Those national averages are very misleading when we are talking about what's happening at very local markets, be it in terms of outcomes, socioeconomic characteristics of the housing stock, all those important aspects, but also about housing finance. Supply and demand, differ a lot at very granular levels. So I just wanted to insist a bit on that point as well. Another point I would like to make, Luca, is the importance of having information not only on housing outcomes, lots of which we've discussed already, but also being able to have indicators on policy settings. Everything that has to do with how tax codes affect the demand, supply, and finance of housing. Everything that has to do with the regulations of land use, zoning, and all that are about conditioning or shaping local housing markets. Everything that has to do with, for example, social programs and how they affect affordability of housing markets. So, until we have very good information on housing outcomes and housing policy settings, I mean, if we don't have that, we're not going to be able to benchmark policies and know what is most efficient and what is most desirable. So I would say, to make progress in our efforts to build a good evidence base for housing policies, but also to look at those two things, right? Policy settings and outcomes. Another aspect, Luca, is to broaden the coverage of countries we typically have at the moment. We know that housing construction activity, housing demand is going to be strongest in the parts of the world where populations are growing. Eric mentioned the issue of demographics. There are several parts of the world where population is growing fast, economies are growing fast, and there is going to be a lot of increase in demand for housing. And those are the parts of the world where typically we have, less information on policy setting and outcomes. So I would, that's my final point at this stage, is that the level of ambition needs to be very high. When here at the OECD we were discussing this and putting together making our own efforts in terms of dissemination of data, compiling indicators and statistics, one immediate realization is that the ambition of the task is enormous. The efforts to collect data, maintain data sets, curate data sets in ways that are internationally comparable, that are timely and all that, that requires collective effort. So I would say that really making sure that we operate in a consortium really of interested parties that can help bridge gaps that we currently have, gaps, analytical gaps, geographical gaps, coverage gaps, and so on, and also be able to make progress in areas where we all agree that we have gaps that need to be filled. So very, very exciting moment and a very welcome initiative. Thanks.
Thank you, Luis. And from your words, I mean, it's fundamental for whoever is taking decision in terms of planning or organizing a country, having a kind of comparable set of data. This is important for fiscal reasons, for plenty of reasons, but it's also very important for real market activities. Without data, I mean, for example, rating agencies cannot take action. And if we don't have a rating agency in the market, I mean, we cannot transform our magic touch in the market is that we transform the most immovable asset, the house, the most traditional asset, in something which is internationally movable, comparable, and financeable. So, I mean, this is a magic thing that housing market is doing, is transforming national markets in a global opportunity. And for doing so, we really need rating agencies and the daily bread for Antonio is, of course, data. Quality data able Antonio to compare country and housing markets. If Antonio is not happy, issuers, mortgage lenders cannot take action. And if they cannot take action, investors cannot move their capital around. So Antonio, I don't know if you want to speak about your daily bread and how you want your bread. I mean, what are the key characteristics for your daily bread? I mean, Antonio, I give you the floor.
Thank you. Yeah. The data is really important for our activity. I'm part of the covered bond team. Generally, in the context of rating agencies, our analysis, mortgage asset analysis, is comparatively much more data-driven than other parts and model-driven. So it's true that in what we can call a developed market, usually we have now fairly good or very good data, but at the same time, when we are approached to look at new jurisdiction, we find it more challenging to find good data. This means that either we need to make some more conservative assumption that ultimately are costly for a issuer or we cannot assign rating. But generally, here we are talking about housing for the next generation, and some of the previous speaker already mentioned the fact that global population is growing a lot. The UN is estimating by 2030 we will have around 8.5 billion people, almost 60% living in urban center. A lot of them will need a new or housing or renovate housing. So we can see that there will be a huge demand for housing finance, and we can consider that at the beginning of the development of housing markets, usually it's retail activity or banks that are funding housing markets, typically through retail deposits. And what is important to consider here is that even at this level of the development and funding of the housing market, it's really important to have good quality data. If we look at literature, for example, on this topic, after controlling for things like country size, the three most important elements for development of housing finance system appear to be the strength of legal rights for borrower and lender, the stability of a macroeconomic environment, but also, and importantly, the depth of the credit information system. So you see that good data is important from the beginning of the development of housing markets. But then as these housing markets growth and banks may either struggle to fund them entirely through deposits or prefer to have a better mismatch between assets and liabilities, then we see that naturally there is a tendency to develop a secondary market with tools such as mortgage liquidity facilities or covered bonds or securitization. And here again, it's fundamental to have good data, and this, as you were mentioning, Luca, is not just because of rating agency requirements, but also because of the requirements of regulators and the requirements of investor. So we believe that generally the lack of data tend to be an impediment for the development of mortgage markets. And the other side of the coin is obviously that if there is a strong mortgage market, if there is the appropriate legal framework, and if there are good data, so then it's much easier to mobilize the private capital towards the housing finance system, toward the development of the housing finance system, because this in turn will make rating agencies, the good quality data will make rating agencies, investor, regulator more comfortable. So from our point of view, we really welcome this initiative of EMF and Ofinet. I think that it's an immense effort to improve on this front, but hopefully and with time and patience will bring fruits and will help develop more housing finance markets.
Thank you, Antonio. I think you're raising a very important point, which is those data are fundamental for the compliance purposes. We should be aware that, probably this will be the last meeting without knowing exactly the rules of Basel III. Once the banking package in Europe will be approved, UK will approve, and the US will approve, we will be all playing with the same cards for the first time in history. And this is a big change. It's a radical change for our industry, because the need of compliance will be the daily bread of every single investor. So if you don't have data, the cost of being an outsider, it will be immense. So we should look also at the opportunity cost of not having the right data, because this will compromise the capacity of an entire country to have access to capital markets, which means at the end of the day, finance their mortgages, giving hope to their citizens. And this is the link, I think, with the elections that we are saying. Every single political system is based on stability, and the housing market is giving this. But for having this, we need data. Oscar, I would like to to bring the spotlight on you. You represent, of course, an important country, Tanzania, but I mean, you are chairing a group of people representing more than 35 countries with all the major mortgage refinancing company in every single country. Housing needs are huge. I mean, I'm thinking to Brazil, they have to build more than 2 million of dwellings per year. Indonesia, we are close to 1 million. Philippines, it's 1 million. I mean, how we can finance this huge need? I give you the floor. Thank you, Oscar, for being with us.
Thank you very much, Luca, and good afternoon, colleagues. It is a pleasure for me to be part of this discussion this afternoon. And I'm especially excited with the joining of Hofinet to this family, because I think that was maybe, if you want to call it, a missing link in terms of really, pulling this all together. And I think it is because the subject of data is very important, and it is important across the board. It doesn't matter which geographical location you are talking about. The need for data to inform these other aspects of the markets are critically important. And I'll try to, as I'm wearing two hats here, as the chair of ISMA, but also the CEO of a mortgage refinance company in Tanzania. When I look at the issue at hand is really similar, whether you're talking about a specific country or you're talking about a segment of the market, and that I'm referring to the secondary mortgage market institutions. So the first thing, I think it has been said very well with Luis, the issue of policy. Locally, when we try to engage with policymakers, for example, here in Tanzania, or when we have discussions at the ISMA level to see what policy interventions would help to deal with some of these housing challenges, at the end of that conversation, data comes up. We need enough data to influence policy. We need enough data to make sure that we support our arguments. As you know, most of these countries also have other policies, other priority in terms of policies, in terms of whether it's health, education, and other social priorities. So I think it's important, number one, in terms of influencing the policies at the country level, but at the industry level, as we engage with some of the international organizations. The second item, I think the second benefit which data will provide is the product innovation. So our markets are dynamic, things are changing, the needs of the markets are never the same. So I think in order to have product innovation and products that are informed by data and being able to support the respective markets, it's important to have a really good amount of data and analytics to really determine what type of products are appropriate for what specific markets. And then thirdly, as you alluded to, Luca, with COP28, the whole issue of sustainability. I think there's a need for a lot of information and data in this area to be able to influence global policies that will actually help in terms of the whole sustainability issue, but specifically as it relates to the housing markets across the globe. So I think this edition of Hofinet for me is really going to be a game changer in terms of pulling together all the information, and especially because now we have really a global association here with essentially almost all the countries represented. So I'm really excited to be part of this. I know Hofinet because we worked with Hofinet in the past. I think so. I'm very familiar with the work that has been done, and I think with the enhancement and the support that EMF and ECBC, as well as other stakeholders, including ISMA, will be happy to contribute to enrich the data, which will, at large, I think, help all of us to move the housing markets in our respective markets. Thank you, Luca.
Thank you, Oscar. I think that I would like just to conclude the panel with another round of questions to all of you. And I think the difficulty and the challenge that we have is to have a synthesis around two very difficult concepts: sustainability and affordability. And the idea that no one should be left behind, I think it's very important in every single market, with every single tradition. If we look officially, no one of us has seen the text of the Energy Performance Building Directive, of course, but I mean, the text approved last Thursday here in Brussels is requiring all the mortgage lenders to improve a new green level of transparency, which goes beyond taxonomy. It is not only the GAR, the green asset ratio, it's not the BTAR. It is really asking about the mortgage portfolio information, how green they are, which means energy performance certification and all this data. With Hofinet, Maria, we discussed that we want to give a clear green touch to this database. We want to give a sense of what is the green portfolio in every single country, how we can improve this. Also, if we look at the Energy Performance Directive text, they will be requiring banks to have a clear strategic action plan on how they will address the improvement of the green portfolio standard, what is the mortgage portfolio standard. So, Maria, can I ask you, for a developer in an emerging country, I mean, building green is much more costly. Who's going to pay this price? How we can match sustainability and affordability in those markets? I think this is a dilemma that we have in several countries.
Ja, der ist zu seiner Frau, glaube ich, geflogen nach USA.
Can I ask maybe to put in mute? Sorry, I mean, there is someone.
Die arbeitet in Washington.
Entschuldigung. Ja. Hallo? Thank you for the killer who killed the voice. Thank you. Maria, the floor is yours.
Yeah, sorry. It's extremely important that indeed the big housing expansion that we are going to see mostly in emerging markets and developing countries because of population growth and urbanization, that stock that is going to be built will be green. But from my recent work in several emerging market countries, on average, to build green in the short term, to build it, it's 10% more expensive or even more. Now, you can gain part of that expense because you have lower energy cost over time, but it is the initial cost that is higher. So when you look at the affordability picture, where incomes have not kept pace in many countries with prices of housing, we have a serious dilemma. In order, for instance, in Egypt, to build greenhouses for the masses, and that is what they are doing at the moment, to add an extra 10% on what is already a very stressed situation by way of affordability is really a challenge. So what I am doing, my task a lot in emerging markets, is looking at the subsidy system that exists in the countries. We need subsidies to build green, and countries need finance for that. They need funding for these subsidies in order to build green. But also a lot can be done by improving existing subsidy systems in many countries to make them more efficient. That is what we are looking for. But subsidies will be needed. And for instance, I'm thinking of a continent like Sub-Saharan Africa. We need these countries to be assisted with subsidized funding for their growing housing stock in order to build green and do green infrastructure and superstructure. So the funds that they are now talking about at the end of the COP meetings, that fund that they built for advanced economies and international organizations to move more money for climate purposes to emerging markets will be critical also for the housing sector, for many other sectors as well, of course, but for the housing sector.
Thank you, Maria. I mean, mentioning subsidies, this is the perfect ball for Luis to step in here. Luis, how we can factor affordability in the equation and this sustainable equation?
Great question, Luke, and I think Maria pointed to many of the important lessons here that we see as well. I think it's important there to keep or to look at it from two different angles. One is how you combine affordability and sustainability in the case of new construction, right? And then Maria, I think, mentioned all the issues of how we can embed norms and standards in building codes, how we can make sure that there are building codes in the parts of the world where construction demand will rise the fastest, how we basically keep track of construction costs and how they develop over time and so on. But there is the whole issue of making sustainability affordable in the case of existing buildings, buildings that are there that may not be up to the most latest standards of energy efficiency and so on. So the finance side that you mentioned, Luke, is extremely important. We've talked so many times, haven't we, about if we can have very compelling evidence that higher standards of energy efficiency through certificates, can reduce the cost of borrowing, for example. That's one aspect of it, making sure that housing and affordable social and affordable housing programs and countries, the element of subsidization that Mary mentioned too, how we can embed in those programs, high standards of energy efficiency, work also not only with access to housing, but also with investments that are needed to upgrade the thermal capacities of buildings and so on. Issues related to the alignment of incentives. We know that throughout the 10-year spectrum, owner-occupiers, landlords, renters, they have very different incentives when it comes to investing in the energy, efficiency of the dwellings where they live. So making sure that policy helps that, aligning those incentives, subsidizing investments where needed, making sure that those policies are also place-based because conditions and needs vary tremendously across a country's territory, aligning incentives when it comes to multi-household residences as opposed to single-family housing. So all this, opens up huge areas of work for policy with very high demands in terms of information, data, indicators, statistics that are needed to make sure that the right policy intervention is tested where it can be most relevant. I think, to me, all that is part of this joint effort that you are proposing. So I see the way ahead here as a very exciting one.
Thank you, Luis. Yeah, indeed. I mean, working on the corridors of the European Parliament, European Commission, I have the feeling that in ESG, the S is becoming bigger and bigger in the political debate. I mean, how do you see things, Antonio, from a rating agency point of view? I mean, of course, you are looking at the ESG data since a few years. Do you share this kind of feeling that the S is becoming an important element in the debate? I mean, and what are you doing as a rating agency to look at this?
I think that there is more and more need for and focus on the social aspects of funding, for example. But at the same time, I see the struggle for it, in the sense that when we discuss instruments that include and take into consideration social aspects, the obvious problem is that these aspects are more difficult to quantify, right? It's already a challenge to quantify the green benefit of certain source of funding. In my opinion, I share an opinion also with others. It's much more challenging to quantify the social component. So yes, there is a push in that direction. In my view, the environmental component will remain the prevalent for the time being. And I echo what Maria and Luisa said in terms of what we can be done. I think that government support will play definitely a role. Alone, financial markets will not find the solution for moving to a more green future and sustainable future. At the same time, I think that the scale of the challenge is so much that government alone cannot be sufficient. So there will always be the need for a very important private sector component. So as Luis has correctly emphasized, the setting of right policies is absolutely necessary for the mobilization of capital towards a more green and sustainable future. And to conclude, look on the point of what agencies are doing. Obviously, we look more at the credit component of the story, and we believe that with time we will have more data to see if green building, green financing is less risky than another form of building, than another form of financing. And we can say that we receive a lot of questions. There is a lot of pressure to move on this front. The reality is that as an organization, we tend to be conservative, but also generally as an approach, we need to go through a credit cycle before we are able to refine and recalibrate our methodology. So we are not in a position yet to change our methodology to incorporate these factors, but it's something that we are monitoring.
Thank you, Antonio. I mean, Oscar, from your point of view, both operational person, I mean, who has to finance the balance sheet, and also as a chairperson of this community. I mean, I don't know if you can elaborate your ideas on affordability.
Yeah, very good point, Luca. And I think it ties into I go back to the issue of data, because I think to me, there are a number of things that need to happen. There isn't really a silver bullet in this one. So in terms of policies within the respective governments, I think it's important through data to influence some of the policies, so that some of the governments can also play a part in supporting the sustainability. And so I think it's a combination of resources internally, but also resources externally, as Maya was alluding to. So some of these funds that are kept aside to support sustainability could be used. But I think it has to be a combination of internal resources and external resources. And I think there's a need for incentives for this to happen. So what kind of incentives? I think that can be structured, looked at, what would be more efficient to be able to encourage people to move towards sustainability. The other factor that I've been thinking about is the issue of pricing. I think there's a need for a pricing differentiation between sustainable products vis-a-vis your normal products that may not carry the sustainability aspects. At some point, investors may want to look at some of these products differently, where maybe they are willing to take a slightly lower return on a product or an issuance that has green features perhaps, or but the end result, the impact that is going to have overall, obviously, is more positive. So until there's a differentiation, I think it becomes a bit difficult to push the envelope on this one. So I think, as I said, it's a combination of a number of things, but clearly to bring affordability, there has to be some incentives or preferential treatment, if you will, for sustainable products, so that investors can tend to go towards those as opposed to just going for the higher return. That's my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. I would like to thank all the speakers for their contribution of today's panel. I extrapolate, a few conclusions is that it is clear the need of a clean set of data, transparent and comparable, and we are fully committed in building this via joining forces with the OFINET. Data are something complex to create that have to be supported by strong governance. Together with data, we want also to establish a governance and a market governance by engaging organizations like the OECD, the World Bank, the Basel Committee, the IFC, the EBRD, in order to join and to work together on definition and harmonizing this data set, because we have in front of us an immense challenge, and we can take action only working together with the institutions active at the global level, at the regional level, but also at the local level and the market side. So this is what we are trying to do, and I would like to thank really all the speakers for their contribution to our activities. With this, I think that we set very nicely the scene of the next panel, which will be on building a green ecosystem and on sustainability. But before going there, I would like to ask Eric if he can give us an overview of the new platform that we are officially presenting today. We are moving all our data from a very old-fashioned prehistoric Excel to something which is interacting. So Eric, thank you very much. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Luca. And I think the panel have highlighted quite well how important data is and how data can change the life of real people. But just collecting data via good definitions is just the first step you have to undertake. So as the EMF-ECBC already collect data since years for the housing market on one side, the housing and mortgage market, and the covered bond market on the other side, it took us an effort to get not the data collection, but the data representation, which is the second step in all data showing steps that should be undertaken, to a new level. And therefore, we developed in cooperation with Storied Data exactly 3 new data tools who are now monitoring our data hub. So the Hypostat data, which is the yearly collection of the housing and mortgage market, the quarterly review data, which is the quarterly selection of housing and mortgage data, and last but not least, the factbook data, which is the collection of the global covered bond data, which are now possible to access easily and in a way more representative way in our new data hub section. So the idea was to take the data, to take our Excel sheets, and to transform our data into real engagement while sharing the data in a more convenient and automated way to finally influence and enabling the power behind the data, as you all were very goodly highlighting in our previous panel. So our new data hub and the 3 single data tools are working with your possibility to take the data and design own charts, and filter the data via a filter section that are comprehensible via areas, countries, and different time frames, and of course the indicators. So the data hub is, as Luca highlighted at the beginning, freely accessible, and it should help all possible stakeholders as researchers, financial analysts, all our members, journalists and policymakers, but of course also our internal analysis to transform our data into real convincing actions. And to end this little introductory presentation, I take the possibility to quickly go to our website to show you how and where to access our data. So if you're going to the EMF or the ECBC sites, to publication, you can find a data hub section here. And you can find the data tools for each our publications here listed. So just to show you, when we are going now to the Hypostat data, as I've introduced, you can see the charts, you can choose the representation you like, you can of course download, save or print the data, and of course you can browse to all our data sets, if it's the mortgage market, the housing market, HPIs for different cities, and then select your required indicator. And at the end, if you like to do further analysis, it is of course also possible to download the final data set behind our data. So with this, we like to invite you to go to our website after our webinar, explore our data and the functionalities of our data tool. And I like to thank you for your attention. And as the development of such a statistical tool is a two-way approach, we are very delighted to receive your feedback and in future rounds work to improve our data tools and the possibilities for you to improve the data. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for the amazing presentation. But allow me to thank Rado and Zoe and StoryData for having the initiative of having proposals. I think we have always to be ready to change. Change is a key element in our culture, and I think they really help us in making a new tool which is available. I think this will make the difference also for policymakers. I'm thinking to the team of the European Commission that have to work on the Mortgage Credit Directive probably in the next mandate, or to the European Banking Authority working on revisiting a bit the Covered Bond Directive. All this information are the commitment of the industry to be ready to change, to improve over time, and build a single market of opportunities. That's why we are making this effort of transparency. And this is also thank you to our partners, StoryData, who have been very helpful with us in proposing this amazing solution. Thank you all. I think that was the perfect scene to allow me to give the floor to Jenny. I mean, speaking about important dates, I mean, Jenny, tomorrow is also an important date for you. I mean, it will be your birthday. So, I mean, it's a great pleasure to have you here with us. I mean, all your speakers, but I'll let you maybe introduce your speakers and thanking you for all the amazing work done on the energy efficiency ecosystem. Thank you, Jenny. I think, Jenny, you are muted. Allow me just to give a brief introduction while we wait for Jenny to come back. I mean, the Energy Efficiency Mortgage Initiative has been really a pillar, a flagship for our organization to position the mortgage industry in supporting a renovation wave. The renovation wave is probably one of the most ambitious political initiative of the European Commission, where Europe for the first time is trying to push the entire regulatory set of the European Union towards a new direction, which is extremely important. We see the European Commission changing the landscape, the European Central Bank, the European Banking Authority, all the major European institutions are giving a clear sign. And allow me to say also to underline the braveness of the European institution, because sometimes they have the feeling they are the only one doing this kind of brave jump. But I think it's very important for the community as a market participant to respond to this challenge. What we are doing at the European Mortgage Federation is we are really trying to build an ecosystem able to banks to play a critical role, and building a new ecosystem where not only the mortgage portfolio can be a driver of change, but also the small and medium enterprises portfolio. With this, I mean, okay, yeah, I mean, it's a great pleasure to have with us, I mean, three friends of us. Allow me to introduce the first one. I mean, Professor Santamuris is online with us from Sydney. Thank you very much for being with us. We have Andy from, I think you're based in the United Emirates, I mean, now officially. Thank you for being with us. I think the designing a new policy framework is a critical aspect. You have been involved in this work for years. And then we have also Carlo from Frankfurt, from the European Central Bank. I think that all our members are very interested in what you are doing, because of course you are on the front line, and our banks have to change following your indication. I think that Jenny is about to join us. Not yet. So maybe, I mean, Matt, can I give you the floor and allow you to set the scene from an academic point of view? And thank you very much for all the contribution that you have provided to this community over these past months. And I think you are letting us reflect and trying to change ideas all together. Matt, I give you the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luca, and thank you very much for the invitation. I have prepared some slides. Can I have my slides? Thank you, Eric. You know, actually, you know, urban overheating and in general, you know, urban climatic change is one of the major problems we are facing in the world. And, you know, many people are asking, what is the real impact, you know, of higher temperatures, you know, in our cities? Actually, during the very last years, we have documented, let's say, in a very serious way, the specific impact of, let's say, higher temperatures in the urban environment. And we know very well that higher temperatures increases the cooling energy consumption in our cities, decreases the efficiency of power plants, increases the peak electricity demand, obliging utilities to build additional power plants. But at the same time, a part of the energy impact increases the, let's say, emission of pollutants from the power plants, increases the concentration of ground level ozone, intensifies heat-related mortality and morbidity, and causes very important mental health problems. At the same time, something which is not very well known, it really decreases the productivity of our population, increases the risk of accidents, and affects the survivability of, let's say, vulnerable population. Next one, please. Do we have really qualitative and quantitative data to support actually the, let's say, the problem? Yes, of course. We know very well from, let's say, real data around the world that for each temperature, for each degree of temperature increase in our cities, the penalty or the average penalty for each one of us is close to 237, let's say, kilowatt hours per person per year. So it's a very serious, let's say, energy penalty. At the same time, we know very well that because of the higher, let's say, demand for cooling during the summer period, this obliges utilities to build additional power plants, increasing the cost of electricity. And this has a penalty of about 21 watts per degree of temperature increase and per person. But at the same time, we know very well that once the temperature is increasing by 1 degree, the efficiency of the thermal and the nuclear power plant is decreasing by about 0.6%, which means that during a heat wave, the efficiency of the power plants may decrease up to 6%, which is really very high. Next one, please. But it's not just, let's say, the technical problem of, let's say, higher temperatures and the impact on energy. It has a very important financial aspect. For example, during the last year, during the heat wave in the UK, the price, of electricity has increased, in just one day by about 5%. But this is not really the worst of the examples. During, let's say, the heat wave in France in 2022, because of the high temperature of the water in the rivers, it was almost impossible to cool down, the nuclear power plants. And this has increased the day-ahead base load power prices at about 610 euros per megawatt hour, which is 10 times higher than the prices from 2017 to 2021. So urban overheating has a very serious problem really on the price of energy. Next one, please. But it's not just, the increase of the energy consumption and at the same time, the increase of the peak electricity demand and the increase of the cost. During, let's say, the recent period and because of the higher temperature, the incidence of electrical grid failure or the blackdown has increasing really tremendously. Between, let's say, the last 9 years in the United States, the number of the blackout events has increased by about 151%. You see the graph. And this has a tremendous impact. For example, during, let's say, the blackout in, let's say, Pacific Northwest zone of United States, 2 years ago, we had 600 excess deaths, 3,500 emergency hospital visits, and loss of electricity to tens of thousands of citizens in the area. Next one, please. It's not just the energy. It has a tremendous impact also on the environment because of the important, let's say, photochemical reactions in the atmosphere. The concentration of the ground level ozone, and ground level ozone is really a toxic gas that kills, is increasing tremendously. And recent studies have shown that during the last 10 years, in the most important cities of China, the concentration of ground level ozone has increased by about 80%. Forecast for the future shows that perhaps we may, let's say, face a tremendous increase of the ground level ozone by 2050. Next one, please. At the same time, we know that because of the higher temperature, and plants they have to work more intensively, for each degree of temperature increase, the emission or the release of, let's say, pollutants by the power plants is increasing by, let's say, almost 3.5%. So imagine that during, let's say, a heat wave, a power plant may emit 35% more pollutants. Next one, please. However, apart of the energy and environmental problem, we have a very serious problem that has to do with, let's say, low-income population. We know very well that low-income population is living in houses or in, let's say, buildings of low quality, which are not, let's say, well protected, and really they face an important problem of indoor temperature and high energy consumption. We have data during the very last years. For example, a recent report by the European Parliament shows that only that low-income households in Portugal, they cover only 2% of their cooling needs because, of course, of the lack of resources. Next one, please. Measurements that have been performed, in many countries around the world shows, for example, that during, let's say, high temperatures period, not heat waves, indoor temperature in low-income households can be as high as 40 degrees for 2, 3, or 5 days. And at the same time, the concentration of indoor pollutants may be 4 or 5 times higher, let's say, than, let's say, the threshold. So the low-income population is the first victim of the, let's say, climatic change. And this brings us to, next slide, please, to the major problem of, let's say, climatic change and especially urban overheating, health. We know very well that, higher temperatures increase heat-related mortality and morbidity, but this is not really a linear correlation or a linear association between temperature and heat-related mortality. Say something which has to do with demographic parameters, socioeconomic parameters, the health infrastructure in the area, and so on. But in average, from hundreds of studies all around the world. We know that those they live as part of neighborhoods, they have 6% higher risk of heat-related mortality than those living, in the coolest part of neighborhood. Next, please. However, something which is not very well known is that higher temperatures affect really mental health. Very recent studies, 2023, shows that the association between, problems of mental health, schizophrenia, psychotic conditions, mood disorders, etc., really is very important, this association. You can see from this graph that summarizes data from many countries around the world, shows that incidents about, let's say, mental health, and especially schizophrenia, mood disorders, and many other things, increases tremendously, really, during the period of, let's say, high temperature. Next one, please. And a part of the health problem, we know very well that there is a tremendous decrease of human productivity as a function of temperature. Studies that have been performed, let's say, all around the world with millions of people, shows that the human productivity may decrease up to 60% when temperature is, let's say, higher than 30 degrees. During the recent heat wave in New Delhi, let's say, in India, the productivity of the outdoor workers has been decreased by about 95%. You understand the impact of such a problem, in the global economy of India. Next one, please. So this is the impact. This is what really happens in the world. And during the very last years, we have really documented all the problems. We have really understood how urban overheating is working, and really we are ready to provide, let's say, solutions in order really to, let's say, decrease or mitigate the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Hopefully you can hear me now. I'm back, and thank you to Luca for covering up for me so smoothly. What I'd hoped to say when I was supposed to take over was that, of course, the climate transition and the role of housing and mortgage markets in Europe, but also beyond, of course, has been at the heart of our activities at the EMF-ECBC since 2015. But for a change, you weren't going to hear about, or you're not going to hear about, or hear from us today on the Energy Efficient Mortgages Initiative, of course, because we take every opportunity usually to share our latest progress. But rather, and as you now know, you'll be hearing from a fantastic lineup of experts who are going to share, and Matt has already started, their perspectives on a variety of ongoing challenges that still face us despite the global efforts that have been undertaken since the signing of the Paris Agreement. So, we're all aware that incredible efforts have been undertaken, but we are still so far away from where we need to be. And I think that's even clearer perhaps now from what Matt has told us. Matt, if I may, just one follow-up question, because of course this morning or earlier on in this event, we heard about demographics and how, of course, we're expecting the world's population to grow and grow and grow. And I was aware of the fact that there is a trend which is expected to continue, and that's, of course, that this trend of urbanization, with the urban population more than doubling in size by 2050. At which point nearly 7 out of 10 people will live in cities. So what you've described, Matt, will arguably just become more and more of a challenge, right? It's going to become more and more difficult as more and more people move to the cities. Is that something else that you're, of course, recognizing in your work and your research?
Yeah, this is a real, let's say, problem, especially, in Europe and also in North America, I think. Let's say the percentage of aged population is increasing, and of course this has a tremendous impact on health. But at the same time, it has a tremendous impact, on the quality of houses in general. Why? Because we need to have, more protected houses. We need to provide, houses that they present, a passive survivability, and I will explain what means that they really may protect people during, let's say, periods of heat wave and during periods, where electricity is not really available. Because as I explained before, temperature, is increasing, but at the same time, the grid failures are also increasing very much. we are expecting that we will have a serious problem, of let's say blackouts during the next years. So imagine, that let's say age population which lives in cities with very high temperature to live without air conditioning. So this is a very serious problem, and this means that the new houses, have to be designed, taking into account the principles of passive survivability. We should not really just count on air conditioning. It's not enough. Because if, age population or, vulnerable population are exposed to high temperature for more than 5, 6, 7 hours, they will have tremendous problems, and let's say heat-related mortality will increase tremendously.
Thank you, Matt. So I think it's clear, right, that something needs to be done, or we still need to work very, very hard to fight against climate change. The effects of climate change are, I think, becoming more and more apparent to all of us and will continue into the past. So I'm really delighted also to be joined by Andy Jobst from the Central Bank of the United Arab Emirates, and also Carlo Di Maio from the European Central Bank, who will respectively kind of consider what we need to put in place in terms of policy interventions in this fight against climate change, but also, I suppose, the perspective of prudential supervisors in supporting banks in not only financing green, but greening finance. So, Andy, if I could come to you. So I think Matt has sketched very, very nicely the kind of challenges that cities, of course, in particular, are facing. So we kind of know what the problems are, but of course, and we kind of know what we should be doing to address these from a financing perspective. But the last 18 months have been characterized by a series of almost unprecedented geopolitical, environmental, and macroeconomic events that are absolutely impacting on Europe's housing and mortgage markets, and potentially have consequences for the demand for building energy performance renovation, and possibly for the renovation wave specifically in the context of Europe. But could you sketch a little bit, what the challenges are you are seeing, the dynamics you're observing in this context?
Sure. Thanks very much, Jennifer. And also thank you and Luca for having me today. I think what we already heard from Eric when he sketched out some of the macro developments is that we've seen an experience over the last 2-3 years, really a very powerful confluence of cyclical pressures and an increased awareness on how the changes in structural drivers of many macro outcomes have created a greater, I would say, greater pressure, not only on household balance sheets at large, but in particular on housing and mortgage finance. And in addition to what each and everyone here on this call has been significantly exposed to, which is the almost unprecedented inflation dynamics, is also an increasing awareness that we're faced with 5 fundamental structural drivers of macro outcomes. That's the digitalization of our societies, the deglobalization or the geopolitical fragmentation, the rising debt levels that causes increasing fiscal strains, demographics, we've just heard before, how demographics will play out, and that in relation to urbanization also creates pressure points when it comes to housing. And then finally, and that's the theme that binds us significantly here together when it comes to housing, is decarbonization. So these are 5 Ds, as we call them, structural drivers that are driving our outlook over the medium and long term, but obviously we're coming out of a period of very high inflation, and that's needless to say had significant impact on the house price developments. If I look through the lens of Europe, we've seen that after significant surge in house prices over the last 1.5 years, especially in France and Germany, house prices have come down. Italy and Spain less so, but a significant slowdown in house price appreciation. And at the same time, housing starts have also fallen off a cliff. So that together has resulted in an interesting dynamic insofar as housing affordability, whether we look through it from a purchasing perspective or a rental perspective. Housing affordability really has not improved as you might suspect if interest rates increase and house prices, pushing house prices lower. As a matter of fact, the supply side effect was stronger. So construction costs picked up and fewer houses are being built whilst demand is still high. So in combination of still strong demand and limited supply, that kept housing prices more stable than initially expected. So that's really my takeaway when it comes to housing by and large in Europe, and similar developments are clearly visible in the US and other parts of the world. I think the important aspect now is how does the price dynamic in the housing market play into the renovation wave.
Thank you, Andy. Just before we turn to kind of, you've sketched, I think, very, very nicely the challenges that we're facing, the drivers of the outlook moving forward. But before we kind of turn now to how we might address those, perhaps Carlos, I could bring you in here because, as I said, Andy has sketched very nicely, I think, the kind of the macroeconomic backdrop and all of the different challenges that we're dealing with for the current moment. From the perspective of the ECB, how do you view this landscape, and what do you see as the main challenges for banks in this context, particularly if we're looking through the lens of financing green and greening finance, of course, which is another important part of the work that you do. And I was wondering if you could give us a sense of how prepared you think banks are for the transition, and then we'll perhaps go back to what we might do from a policy perspective. And Carlo, I'll also come back to you for that in a moment as well.
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the work you've been doing. I think it's been hour and a half very interesting listening here and all the information that were shared. The question is very important because we always discuss about financing the green, but I think the real question here is greening finance. And from our perspective, it's not the greening per se. So it's not just about being sustainable, but from the prudential perspective, it's really about tackling risks. We have repeating many times that aligning with the sustainable transition doesn't mean simply becoming sustainable per se, but means also making sure that banks are aligned with in the European Union with the current regulatory framework. So if you think about Fit for 55, think about the EU climate law, the Green Deal, being misaligned with all of these regulatory objectives means basically betting against the transition and means building up a large strategic risks for banks. So it's a very risky bet, and we are making sure that these type of risks are properly covered. But as I said, greening finance is a key. Is a key problem here, and you'll be discussing about the real estate market. So there is not much we can do about building, from the scratch everything that is energy efficient. But we have a huge effort in front of us in transitioning what is not energy efficiency. So looking at the entire spectrum of sustainability and to make sure that the banks understand this challenge of transitioning the economy. Since 2020, we've been asking them to put in place a comprehensive risk management framework. You spoke about data. Data has been key for us. We've been asking banks to collect the data, move from proxies to granular data, develop the methodologies, and make sure that via this data they can understand the risks and the opportunities. So we've been following up with banks to make sure really that they understand what is coming in their way, that they understand what kind of environment they're moving in, and they can progress. So without this information, it's really difficult for banks to understand how they can green their finance. So how can they move ahead if they don't know what's their exposure, if they do not collect the data? How can they price risks? How can they incorporate these risks into their product offering? One example, we've been inquiring now for 2 years in a row banks on their exposure to low energy efficient properties, trying to understand how much of their portfolio is impacted by the current transition policies. And we have been, let's say, surprised to see that up to today, there are still many banks that do not ask for the energy performance of the properties when they originate a mortgage. So we're not speaking about the stock, we're speaking about the flow, what is being originated today. And that's a challenge in greening finance, because if I don't know as a risk manager, as a portfolio manager, what's in my portfolio, then I cannot really take a decision in terms of greening the finance. And this is right now, I think, the biggest challenge for banks, to understand exactly what's their exposure, what is the kind of risk profile from a sustainability environmental perspective, and try to make sure that they mitigate these risks. And I think you mentioned EPBD was so the performance building directive that is basically nearing completion, and this is a key example of what is coming up.
Thank you, Carlo. Andy, if I could come back to you, you obviously sketched, as I said, very nicely the challenges we're dealing with at the moment, the potential pressure that these challenges are placing on the renovation wave in Europe in particular. Could you give us a sense of what you consider to be the most effective types of policy intervention for Europe and beyond to support the transition? And also, I might ask you, in your role at the Central Bank of the United Arab Emirates, what do you consider to be the role of central banks in steering the transition through monetary policy operations, for example? Are there lessons that we can learn? Do you have any kind of golden tips that you might share? Thank you.
Jennifer, thank you very much. That's quite a bouquet of questions, but I try to be brief. I mean, maybe if you can bring up the slides again, that would make things a bit more visual. I recognize that we're already 1 hour, 40 minutes into the call, and attention might be waning. So I'm mindful of that. Maybe as a preface to what's on the slide. I mean, clearly, many households are struggling to finance, costly energy savings, renovations to their homes, and financing the heat pumps and so on, when interest rates are very high and credit conditions get ever more tight, and recognizing that the rate of renovation is far too low compared to where it needs to be. So we're talking about 1% of the building stock being renovated compared to 4% where we need to be at the minimum. That creates a challenge of quite a tall order. So just to kind of put things in perspective, we're essentially talking about two types of levers, right? We've got market mechanisms, price-based levers, and non-price-based levers, policy interventions. And in the housing market, we do have the possibility of working through prices. That's the carbon pricing, especially when it comes to direct energy consumption. So that's space heating, etc., that is not electrified. There's potential to do more, but by and large, the non-price levers are important when we are faced with so-called market failures, because it takes, as we know, it takes a long time. That Hungarian example was very telling. It takes 200 years to turn over the building stock into an energy efficiency that is consistent with the European standards. So this is one constraint, capacity constraints, but also liquidity constraints. We have a gap between owners and renters, but also we know that the cost cannot many households cannot afford the cost straight away, and they need financing to bridge the gap between a coincidental expenditure and the benefits that accrue over time. And so fiscal policy comes in, structural policies come in through land use, building codes, etc., reporting requirements. but also the financial sector in terms of prudential requirements, what was just mentioned, efforts taken by the central banks. If we flip to the next slide, I've got 2 slides prepared that give you a bit of a visual as to what I mean by this. And we need to be mindful that high energy prices per se should be beneficial to energy renovation, energy efficiency renovations, because the energy savings I accrue by making my home more energy efficient should pay off the expenditure I have upfront more quickly. But at the same time, we know that not only energy prices have gone up, but also construction costs, building materials, labor, and so on. So when you look at the left, on the left side, it compares the amortization time in years for the various European countries in 2019 compared to after the invasion of Ukraine, when energy prices went up. And you see that by and large, we have, especially those countries where we have a significant potential for reducing emissions from the housing stock, an increase in the order of 3 to 5 years. And then to the right side, and apologies getting a bit more complicated here, if you chart on the right side, an increase in the energy price level relative to the end of 22, and then look at the average amortization time of energy renovation in number of years, and you compare different scenarios that have embedded a different increase of renovation cost, ranging from plus 10% all the way to plus 40%. You see that when we look at those downward sloping curves relative to the average number of years it would take to pay off your energy efficiency renovations before and after the energy price shock, which was about 3 years of that were added in terms of amortization time, you see that in a scenario where renovation costs remain under control, we are still in that ballpark of about 10 years, 11 years. That is a plannable horizon, and that can be financed by a significant part of the population, but not by everyone. And if you'd be so kind to flip to the next slide, and then I conclude here. The 2 fiscal levers are really targeting the vulnerable population, are grants and interest rate subsidies. What I have not mentioned is in the number of factors that play into calculating what is the amortization break even between the cost of financing my retrofitting renovation relative to the energy savings payoff. I also need to factor in that interest rates are higher and in all likelihood remain high in the foreseeable future. So if you add the financing cost into the equation, so you have renovation cost, you have energy cost, and you have the financing cost, and you assume that the energy renovation should not cause households to become more probable to default on their mortgage loans, then what comes out of this model we've developed is the amount of transfer payment subsidies that are required, or the interest rate break households would need not to default more, assuming that they would finance their house via mortgage or take a loan to fund the renovation. So in terms of grants, the calculation for Europe would be that in aggregate, 42% of all energy renovation needs to be co-financed by the government. It could also be done, through blended finance when it via guarantees and so on. But for simplicity, let's keep it to grants, right? So that would be to the most, by and large, the poorest households, and then about here in this case 17%, so around 20%. Break on the interest rate. So if the interest rate is 3%, then 20% of 3%, so 60 basis points would need to be shaven off to ensure that households on average are not more probable to default on their mortgage. So the 2 numbers for you to bear in mind: 40% grants or a 20% reduction when it comes to the interest that burden households would face on average if they were to make their homes fully energy efficient, and all households would do that. Final point, and then I conclude, Jennifer, on the policy options. I think from the central banking perspective, we've seen a lot of activity on the asset side, so tilting asset purchases towards green assets. That corporate sector asset purchases have benefited from that when it comes to the ECB. But also, one could conceivably think of turning the highly successful TLTRO funding scheme for banks, the longer-term refinancing scheme, into a green TLTRO, and targeting green mortgages or green investments. Coming now, speaking from the perspective of an emerging market central bank, I think one should not ignore the liability side of the central bank. So to make a plug for our current green program, we are developing a green monetary bills program where we source green cash flow from the economy, assets that are identified as ESG compliant and satisfying the climate ambition, and issue monetary bills backed by those green cash flows. That's a very useful way for central banks that did not have an asset purchase program that deal with excess liquidity, so they cannot do much on the asset side, but that have excess liquidity and need to work through the liability side in mopping up liquidity. And we believe that in addition to some of the things that can be done on the market operation side, certainly monetary bills that are green and could support also the financing of energy efficient housing could be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. We have about just a few minutes left, and I wanted to go back to Carlo. Carlo, you talked obviously about the challenges for banks in understanding, if you like, their climate preparedness. I was wondering, how is the ECB kind of concretely helping banks to get there? I know we're of course aware of the ECB's economy-wide climate stress tests, which are giving, I think, some really important and valuable information to banks. But perhaps you just want to say a few words about what the ECB is doing in that respect.
Thank you, Jennifer. Be very, very brief. And I think it's not the kind of help everybody's, when you hear the word help, it's not what comes mind in terms of helping, but from prudential perspective, chasing the banks means helping them, and that's what we're doing now. So we're basically stepping up effort in terms of making sure that they are prepared. You may have read in the news just a couple of weeks ago, we have started basically following up on what we said we will do, basically enforcing our requirements. This is because we have now 2.5 years after we published the guide, we have a number of banks still has been unable to tell us whether they're material or not exposed to climate and environmental risks and what this means for them. And I think this is something that we decided we will follow up. And also the vice chair announced in a speech a couple of weeks ago that we're now moving on imposing what is called periodic penalty payments for banks that fail to meet our requirements. So in other words, we have been telling banks that either they remediate their shortcomings by a certain date, or if they don't comply, they will have to pay every day a penalty for the shortcomings that remains unresolved. And that's what we think, is helping banks, because it means making sure their mind is focused on what they need to deliver. They understand the challenges. Just we heard from Matt the information about what means for people living in this type of properties, and we spoke with banks, and now this is not a risk for me, because if energy prices go too high, people would just be in the cold and we pay the mortgage, and I think this is not the kind of answer we can accept. We've done a lot on the commercial real estate and residential real estate energy efficiency angles. We've been following up with the banks, making sure that they can integrate this consideration into their credit lending, and that is not just from a risk perspective, but also from the opportunity perspective, because maybe by granting 10,000-20,000 more for energy efficiency improvements, I can de-risk my mortgage. That is a property that becomes more valuable on the market, and this is something what we're trying to do right now.
Thank you, Carlo. I think a really strong message there that I think is is certainly passed and hopefully well understood. I think also some very important information from Andy, also some food for thought there. And Andy, if we can, we'll share your slides with the group. Perhaps just before I finish, I know that Luca is keen to be able to say a few words before we wrap up, but I wanted to give the last word to Matt before we do. And Carlo, I think you made a really important point here. This is also about human beings and their health and well-being and their productivity, etc., their quality of life. So, we started with Matt with some, I think, really important messages. Matt, I'd like to give you the last word. Where do we go from here? What are our priorities? What should we be focusing on if we're focusing on human beings?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. During the last, let's say, 15 years, there is a tremendous research that has been carried out about, mitigation and adaptation technologies. Actually, we have developed technologies really for the built environment that can decrease the temperatures up to 4.5 or 5 degrees. 5 years ago, we were able to decrease the temperature or the peak temperature of cities up to 2.5 degrees. And actually, we have more than 250 large-scale mitigation projects all around the world where the peak temperature has been decreased by, let's say, 2.5 degrees. The development of the new super cool materials that really may decrease the temperature to 5 degrees because they present subambient temperature. For example, imagine, a roof material or a facade material that without really the use of any energy under the sun and during the summer may present up to 10 degrees lower or subambient temperature. So it's a natural condition. So now we are able to decrease the temperature of cities up to 4.55 degrees. This is what really we have succeeded in Riyadh in the huge mitigation project that will work there. And we expect that in the near future we may, let's say, of cities up to 5-6 degrees. However, the real problem is not really the technological problem, in my opinion. It's more the financial problem, especially in cities. Actually, those that they increase the temperature, let's say in the built environment, they don't have any penalty. Everyone may, let's say, increase the temperature of a city by building, any kind of, let's say, development without really taking care of, let's say, the environment, without taking care the potential increase of the temperature, without using the proper materials. You see that everywhere now they put black asphalt, something that was developed 100 years ago. Well, now we have excellent materials that may decrease the temperature of cities. And the problem is that this is a market which is not regulated. So it is very important in the near future, and this is what we're trying to do in the new European Bauhaus in the European Union now. We try to develop really the financial tools in order really, let's say, to oblige those that they increase the temperature in our cities to pay for it, and those that they decrease the temperature really of our cities to have the credits for it. So we have to develop a new mechanism really that those that they increase the temperature in our cities, they have to pay, and those that they decrease the temperature, they have really to have benefits. This is something that has been developed for the, let's say, greenhouse gases, but is not developed really for the overheating, especially for cities. Don't forget that, by 2030, we expect that more than 80% of the European population will live in cities. So I think that, and I like to conclude with this, actually, we have a tremendous ecological development. We can decrease the temperature, of cities up to 5 degrees. But the main problem is that we don't have the proper financial tools, and we have to develop really these tools in order really to boost the involvement of the financial sector, the private sector, and let's say the state sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for that very good comment to end on. And again, message received and understood. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Carlo. Thank you, Matt, for what I hope was a very interesting panel discussion. And now I hand over to you, Luca, to conclude our session today.
Thank you very much, Jenny, and a warm thank you for all the speakers today. I mean, you really help us in setting the scenes for the next year. We have a year in front of us which will be very challenging. And we cannot guarantee what will be the result of the COP28 tomorrow. We cannot guarantee you the result of the European election or the result of the American election. But we can guarantee on our commitment as a community to drive the change, to be innovators, to change the mind of the market. I think we need to act all together as a team and to produce a very concrete set of action, policy measures that can help people to have a better life. I really believe in the dream of the European Union, which is peace and prosperity. And I think the housing market was a major driver of peace and prosperity in a lot of countries. Spain, in Germany, with the reunification. And I think we need to build and to work together to build this new hope. Next year, we will be in different places. In 3 months' time from here, on the 11th and the 12th of March, we will be in Singapore, gathering all the Asian stakeholders and trying to drive the change also in that area. In 5 months' time, we will be in Reykjavik, and we hope to see you all there. Then we will be in September in Porto, and then in October probably in Zanzibar to make a first capital market platform in Africa, because we walk the talk, and we want not only to bring capital to the countries that they need it the most, but I mean also to bring the entire community there and to see, to discover how the world is, and to bring solutions in every single corner of the world. With this, I would like to thank all the speakers again, all of you. We need you next to us, so please don't abandon us next year. Stay close to us, bring us solutions, bring us ideas, because we have a lot to do. When we were all in the school, we were all dreaming to save and change the world. I think that's our opportunity now. So don't be lazy, don't be hidden behind your desk. Just step up and be ready to change the world. With this, I would like, we are approaching the 21st of December. The 21st of December is the solstice of winter. In every religion, in every culture, is the moment where the light fight against the darkness and bring new hope to the world. So whatever is your religion, whatever is your thing, just fight. Let's fight together for the darkness. We have all our sympathy, all our closeness to the families who have been fighting the darkness this terrible year. And we hope that together with you, we can build a new hope for the world and building a new housing market and giving a new opportunity for capital markets. Thank you very much. Stay close to us and be tuned, because we will do things also next year that you will be probably involved. So be close with us. Thank you all for your kind attention.